All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's managed to have some lunch. As I see, we're just after the lunch hour. There might be some more people coming in, but let's keep the door open and see what happens. My name is Ninja Lacey. I work for Netherlands Food Partnership. And together with True Price Foundation, with ILRI and with GAIN, we're hosting this side session at the CGIAR Science Week. So it's wonderful to be here, and thank you all for coming. Very quickly on the Netherlands Food Partnership, we are a network organization in the Netherlands, and we strive to create partnerships that strive for SDG 2, so a world without hunger. We work with a country focus in a multi-stakeholder way, and we always use a food systems lens in our work. One of these partnerships that I'd like to highlight is the Global Partnership for the True Price of Food. We've been working with True Price Foundation for the past couple of years on establishing this partnership. And the partnership now has over 100 members from all across the globe. So that's something we're really proud of. And during today's session, we'll highlight some of the work we've been doing. So my colleague Margaret from True Price Foundation will be taking us through the methodology. Colleagues Getachew and Samuel from ILRI will be showcasing the example of our work with ILRI in Ethiopia. And then our colleague Julia from GAIN will be talking us through our food baskets project and scoping reviews that we're specifically doing for health externalities. But first, I would like to call to the stage is Nomkulo Kovic, ILRI's Director General representative to Ethiopia, for a few words before we dive into the true pricing methodology. So please welcome Nomkulo.
Thank you very much. Where did you say I should stand? Okay, thank you very much. I think in addition to lunch, we also have very stiff competition from a big CADEP session that is taking place in parallel. I think maybe first a disclaimer is that I do sit on the advisory board of the Netherlands Food Partnership. And currently I serve as the Director General's representative to Ethiopia for the International Livestock Research Institute. And there I also serve as the convener for 11 CGIAR centers that are present in Ethiopia. Let me first start by appreciating the partnership. It started in a rather unconventional way in that I listened to somebody at the Netherlands Food Partnership talking about true price work. And I thought, wow, that would actually be good to see how it relates in a different context, in an African context, and in association with work that countries are doing around their food systems transformation pathways. And so thank you very much for at least responding to the initial interest, and I'm happy that it has come to where it is today. I do particularly like the title of today's session, The Power of True Price Transparency as a Roadmap for Healthy, Affordable, and Sustainable Food for All. And I will spend a couple of minutes indicating why I particularly like the title. The first is on the why food systems transformation pathways. The fact that you are looking at true pricing from a systems perspective is very useful. Countries have developed pathways as in response to UN Food Systems Summit. And countries will do stuff with or without evidence. They will do stuff because there is need to transform our food systems. And in fact, without even a transformation agenda, our food systems will transform. And so I think the role of the work that you are doing, some of which we will hear about today, is to inform that transformation, to try and provide direction to the transformation through the kinds of evidence that you generate. And so coming back to the title again, the power of true price transparency as a roadmap for healthy, affordable, and a sustainable food for all, I want to look at it against 4 kind of areas of considerations. The first one is the transparency. The evidence to provide transparency in how we make decisions on what we are going to choose to do. And I think true pricing is one way through which you can add to the decision-making processes when people are deciding what can they, which direction they ought to take. And then, of course, there's the healthy and affordable. The food needs to be healthy and affordable, but what does healthy actually mean? We know that we are gravitating, even here on the African continent, towards more overweight, obesity. All those are costs from our food systems. So I think nuancing our true price work towards context to look at what the challenges are. What's the cost of overweight and obesity? What is the cost of undernutrition itself? And we know for Ethiopia in particular, in 2009, they estimated the country was losing 16.5% of its GDP to undernutrition alone. So what if we added all the other problems of non-communicable diseases? The cost would be much, much, much higher. Then there's a sustainability part, sustainable food for all. What that tells me is that we need some nuancing. What does that mean under different contexts? Are the equations for true cost pricing the same? Is it the same everywhere, or do we need to look at things differently? And hopefully we'll hear some of that also today. And then finally, it is important that when we look at true cost pricing, we really need to look at what it means under different circumstances. I've challenged my colleagues here to say, yes, livestock products present problems from an environmental perspective. But if a country is losing 16% of its GDP, what's the cost of that? What's the cost in terms of development? What's the cost in terms of, so in circumstances where milk might actually be the most accessible nutrient to prevent some of the undernutrition, how do we address true cost accounting in such a context? And so it's important for us to look at nuance under different circumstances. And so as I await to hear from what people are going to present, I want to leave you with some challenges because, you know, I come from a teaching background, so challenging people is something that I have honed over the years. Challenge and then walk away and hope somebody will come back with a solution. And so really the challenge that I want to leave with you is we are here on a continent today that is busy with a lot of things. One, we've been hit by climate change in a really bad way. And I usually tell people here in Africa, you will find it very difficult to find somebody who will tell you there's no such thing as climate change because we're living it. It's here with us. If you go through 9 growing seasons without rain and you depend on rain for food production, it would take some convincing for somebody to tell you there is no climate change. And so we've seen a change in thinking of we want to develop, but we would like to develop with a positive trajectory on climate issues. So if you're going to be looking at true costs of whatever, think in terms of that context. What are you generating as information that would help in terms of suggesting solutions of where our transformation process ought to be going? That's the challenge that I would like to leave with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomkule, for these wise words. This is not working yet. Yep. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maurits. I'm from the True Price Foundation. And I'm a bit new, to be honest, here at the CGIAR community. I was very inspired that people call it the CG community. I'm not there yet. I'm not that close yet. But I'm amazed. I'm amazed with what I've been seeing this week so far, the great people and their great work. I'm also amazed that, is it working? Yes, perfect. What also amazes me is a feeling that I get here that I got as well in Cali, Colombia last year during COP16. So many people working so hard on global challenges, and still, if we're honest to each other, the signs are still red. How is that possible? I think, well, we think at True Price that it's partly because we're not seeing everything. We're blinded. And we hope that our methods for creating transparency can shine a light on certain things. Well, that was a short life. So I want to tell you a little bit about true pricing, what that is, how we do it. And then, more importantly, how we apply it. And then even more importantly, great colleagues here are going to tell their experience with using the method in Ethiopia. So let's go to the first slide, maybe a little bit about the True Price Foundation. So we are an Amsterdam-based organization. We've been working on this issue for over 15 years. I'm a bit biased, but I think I can say safely that we are the global thought leader, or one of them at least, in this small but growing field. And we have been working these 15 years with governments, big companies, small companies, farmers all over the world to understand true pricing and to apply it to grow towards a healthier and more sustainable society. What is a true price? Well, we actually start with this vision that the global economy is unsustainable. And why is that? We see climate change, we see water scarcity, droughts, poverty. Why is that? Well, it's a very complex question, but one thing we can acknowledge is that a lot of these problems actually arise in the value chains, the supply chains of the products we buy and consume every day. But if we buy a product in a store or a supermarket or wherever, we just see this, a market price, one number. And we think, okay, well, probably it's a bit of the cost of the producer plus some profit margin, and that's it. But as you probably all know, in the whole supply chain of a product, a lot more is happening. Yeah. So there's all types of damage to the environment, to nature, to people happening in the whole production process. Of course, CO2 emissions, for example, from transport, the use of water in scarce water areas, etc. And all of these things is a damage with a real cost. Like Namkula said, I think in Africa, people are understanding more than maybe other places in the world that this is not hypothetical. These are real costs to society, now and in the future. But currently, we allow companies, governments, organizations, people to basically let other people bear the costs of these impacts. So these costs are so-called hidden or externalized. And actually, next slide, true pricing is quite a easy concept in a sense. What we basically say is, look, let's take the market price, but let's make all these hidden costs visible. Let's internalize all these hidden costs. So we look at environmental and social costs. And at the environmental side, soil, water, air pollution, scarce water use. The social side, things like forced labor, child labor, health and safety. We take all of these impacts, we monetize them, and we add them to the price. And then you have a true price of a product or a commodity. Next slide. But the most important thing, and I hope this will be the main point you will take away from this, from my part of this session, is that I don't want to raise all prices. I'm not saying we should start paying true prices tomorrow, because I know it's not possible, right? We cannot afford that directly. So the big goal of true pricing is not to make things more expensive. It's to decrease these external costs to the bare minimum. And I think that should be the dot on the horizon for all of us, because if we minimize these costs on a global level, then our economy can be sustainable. And there are various ways to do that, and I will dive into that later. But the idea is to decrease these external costs over time. So that's a bit about the background of what we do, why we do it. Then how do we do this? How do we calculate it? Nina? And our method is based on the 3 R's: rights, responsibility, and remediation. First, rights. As you might understand, the overview I just gave of all these different impacts that we take into account should not be a trivial choice. So what we did is we took international conventions as our basis, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ILO Convention, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we basically say if a company or organization breaches one of these rights, then that is and it's not accounted for in the price, then it's an externality. Another way to frame this is that the SDGs, the true price is actually SDGs on product level. I know you guys like SDGs here, so that's why I did it. Second one, responsibility. This is from the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, basically saying, look, governments should protect these rights, economic actors like companies should respect these rights, and victims of violations should be entitled to remediation. And that brings me to the last part, remediation, a core concept of true pricing and a word that nobody understands. Remediation for us consists of 4 different parts. It's restoration, compensation, prevention, and retribution. And this is the core issue because this is how we monetize externalities. This is how we value them. What we basically say is, look, first of all, You want to restore the damage as much as possible. So I'm a company, I pollute a lake, water pollution, I can call another company to clean up the lake. And then I get an invoice from that other company, and then I have the costs for water pollution. But sometimes that's not possible. For example, with social costs, it's very difficult to go back in time and say, I'm going to restore that. So the second best thing is compensation, both for physical health, mental health, and other things. And then, of course, as a third thing, you want to prevent the reoccurrence of this issue. And we added a fourth one because we believe that if the human rights violation is severe, then we should also penalize it to incentivize companies to prevent this. And this is also a very crucial part. These things are very, very expensive. So as a company, if you want to restore and compensate all of these, it's super expensive. You rather have this prevented in the first place. Okay, on to the next slide. Sometimes I get emotional. Yes, we can skip this. Yes. So as you might understand already, if you want to calculate all of these factors, 20 different impacts, then we have to calculate 87 indicators, around 300 model input data points. I see Samuel looking like, yes, I've done all of this, and it got me a lot of work. But you understand this is a lot of data. And the good news is we have been working on this for years, and we're getting more efficient. So we have more and more tools to help and optimize it. And with emerging technologies, I'm very positive that we can upscale this in the future. Next slide. So our method is developed in cooperation with the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands, the Dutch government, and about a dozen of private and more societal institutions. The good news is, if you have nothing to do tonight, you can download it. It's freely available, publicly available, and you can read it all. And you can start doing it by yourself. Yeah, next slide. So some examples of how we calculate this. Actually, the basic idea is quite simple. So we have an external cost, let's say climate change. You take a footprint indicator, which is CO2 equivalence, and a monetization factor. And then you have a true price. So let's dive into an example. One of the impacts that we often take into account is land use. You will see it later. What we do is we take the original biome of an area. We search for the data on what is the original amount of species there. And we consider how much land has been used to produce a certain amount of products. And then you can assess the land use and thereby the biodiversity loss per kilogram of product based on the mean species abundance, if that rings a bell. So then we have the footprint. Next to that is the monetization factor. And here we use compensation costs because, well, you cannot really go back in time and restore the land, plus you don't want to lose your farm. So the best thing you can do is compensate for the cost that have been done. Another example, a social one, living income, very important. So this is the income gap for smallholder farmers. We take the household income, we take the household cost, we know more or less the household profit, and we compare that to the living income benchmark. That is a complicated term for just a decent living income, a decent income, which we all would like to have. And then if we compare these, we have the living income gap. Subsequently, we monetize it. Well, it's already in a monetary value, so that's easy. The only thing that we add to it, the next slide, is that we include auditing costs to prevent the reoccurrence. So this is very high level how we calculate these external costs. And I hope you see that although it sounds maybe complicated, in reality, it's not even that complicated. Then, how do we use this in practice? Because that's the most important thing, right? We don't just want to do calculations and then make a beautiful report and go back to sleep. We want to change something. So one of our first partners was Tony's Chocolonely, a Dutch chocolate company, sources cocoa from Ivory Coast and Ghana. And they wanted to have slave-free cocoa. And through our calculations, they were able to develop a strategy to increase the premium to their farmers, to lower forced labor, to lower child labor, and to get as many farmers as possible to a living income. This is work that they've been doing for a decade now. But this type of data really helped them to make these informed decisions. The current project, which is similar but even bigger, I would say, is a project we're doing in the banana value chains in Peru and Dominican Republic, where we work together with a whole bunch of value chain actors and the Dutch government and the local cooperatives to decrease the true price of their bananas over time. So we calculated the true price, and based on these insights, they saw, hey, the water costs are super high. We need to do something about this. And with the farmers, putting them in the driver's seat, they came up with all these interventions, like drip irrigation, the renovation of these old plants, solar panels, etc., to decrease the true price gap and to improve their income over time. Because through these interventions, their yield goes up, the quality of the bananas goes up, and that's actually super beneficial for them. And what is interesting about this is that this is all funded by the private partners in the value chain, the consumers in the Netherlands who paid a little bit extra in their supermarket last 2 weeks ago, and the farmers are investing themselves as well, because they see that in the long run, this will benefit them financially. Next one. But the applications are a lot. So we work a lot with a big caterer in the Netherlands. And they had a look at all of their recipes in their restaurants. And they looked like, hey, our tuna sandwich is actually pretty bad for the environment. And also the social impact in the Maldives and in Thailand is really high. That helped them to now make a hybrid tuna salad. Maybe that doesn't sound very tasteful, but it's actually pretty nice, with lupine beans, which decreases the impact without their customers even knowing it. The taste is the same, the nutritional value is the same. So these are kind of interventions that you can do based on this data. And one very important, I believe, study we helped with this amazing group of organizations based on the United Nations Food Systems Summits in 2021 was the Global True Cost of Food study. And what we found in this study, on the next slide, is that the total health and environmental cost of the global food system is around $20 trillion per year. Yeah, wow, indeed. Because if you look at it, that's more than double what the market value of this whole system is. So double, we cost double the damage of what we pay for it. And a lot is, as you can see, in the unhealthiness of our diets. And this is the real tragedy of our system. That sustainable and healthy food is now more expensive than the unsustainable and unhealthy food, simply because we just don't want to see we just don't want to see these externalities. It's a massive blind spot in our economy. Next one. And I'm very happy to see that this concept is gaining more international attention. So when I started 6 years ago, nobody knew about true pricing. Now, if I'm on a birthday party, some people know it, so that's a good sign. And we also see policymakers adopting it. And what really helps, of course, is that FAO used true cost accounting in its food and agricultural report twice in 2023 and 2024. The Dutch government is now implementing true prices in its policy, and true pricing has also informed CSDDD policies at the European level. But one of the biggest compliments we got last year, a big piece in the New York Times about the hidden cost of food. And we had been working with them for over 1.5 years to get this out. And what was really interesting, and I'm going to be honest with you about this, is that they also interviewed a couple of our partners/competitors who are working in this field about our method. And yes, our method is not perfect. We are definitely not there yet. And I think, as Namkulo also rightfully said, the local context is very important. But in this article, one of our competitors said, it's not perfect, but it's the best one we have so far. So I'd really encourage everybody to, well, read the article, to get into the method, and learn more about true pricing. I think we have a beautiful coalition on it. And if you have more questions, feel free to ask later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maurice has presented the methodology part, so it has really done a very good favor to me. So I will not go into the methodology aspect. The true price of coffee in Ethiopia, this project is at ILRI. We have a project on food systems transformation, generating evidence that fits into the transformation of food system in Ethiopia. One of the project components is true cost accounting of food. And then when we try to implement this project, we found that we have a kind of gap in terms of the methodology. So we invited, as Namakulo said, True Price to support us in that. And in order to cover that cost of the engagement of True Price Foundation in this process, we also approached the Netherlands Food Partnership to support the whole process. So this is a tripartite engagement. If you want, it's also more than 3 parties, because we have another donor that has supported our work, the IDRC it is an IDRC project. 4 parties are engaged in this. And what we did was the True Price Foundation doesn't work. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So the True Price Foundation gave us 4 rounds of training, and the trainers are composed of ILRI staff. We also invited other CGIAR centers. Maybe not all have participated, but more than the CG members, the national system was the most beneficiary. We had participants from the Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research, like 3 participants. We have participants from 3 or 4 universities. In total, we had 15 participants who were engaged in this. This is intentionally, we did this intentionally because the university participants were the university professors, so that this knowledge will go into the university circle and get a multiplier effect. Next, please. And our engagement with TruePrice is not only the capacity building, but because TruePrice Foundation has done work previously on coffee, we invited them to demonstrate the methodology on coffee, Ethiopian coffee value chain, not at national level, but in limited areas. And then that involved the hotspot analysis on coffee. Hotspot analysis is just a kind of preliminary analysis that depends on literature review and using secondary data. They did it. And we collected data from 3 districts in Ethiopia, like from about 400 households from coffee growing areas. And they did the data analysis. And I will present the preliminary results of that data analysis. And the next will be we will work on publications and policy briefs, because this is purely a work that has policy implications. And we close that chapter, but we didn't limit ourselves to coffee. Because ILRI is a livestock research institute, we expanded this project activity into sheep, goat, poultry, and dairy value chains. We have collected and analyzed data for sheep and goat value chains, and we are collecting data for poultry. The data collection started today, and dairy data collection will proceed in the coming weeks. So we are in this way. So please, next. Next. As I said, Ethiopia has very huge coffee growing areas. So we just took very small area because we want to test this, how it works. And then because we didn't have a budget to cover all over the coffee growing areas, we limit our service to some locations. Jimma is an area known for the forest coffee and others. So we limited our service to 3 districts in Jimma. Next, please. Coffee, we have 4 coffee production systems. The plantation, which compose about 5% of the coffee production. The forest coffee, it is about 10%. The semi-forest coffee, about 35%. And the rest, the garden coffee is about 50% of the coffee production system. Please, next, please. Maurice has shown you this picture. When we do the hotspot analysis, we see it in true cost accounting. We need to contextualize what you need to do. Like in terms of coffee, we looked into all these things, and we found that water pollution, air pollution, land use, contribution to climate change, land transformation, and use of fossil fuels were very important environmental aspects. And from the social externalities, we found that under-earning, gender equality, underpayment, and the child labor were very important in terms of coffee production. So we focused our data collection and analysis on this. As I said, we collected data from about 400 something households. We also used secondary data because you can't get a complete picture of the reality on the ground using the primary data only. For example, our data collection overlapped with the time where there was a change in the taxation in the rural areas, and the people were not willing to tell us the real value of their output, coffee output production. They told us very small figure. So we have to substantiate this with the national data. And we have to substantiate this with other big surveys that have been done by some others before. So after we analyzed the data, this is a general one, we found like the total true price gap of about 17.8, like $18. Whereas the market price of coffee is less than $15 in Ethiopia, the roasted coffee. That means the externality is way ahead of just, it's a double, almost more than 100% of the market price. And when we look into the composition of the social and environmental costs, the social cost was higher than the environmental costs. The nature of work, as you can see, its contribution to climate change, we consider the carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide emission to the environment and convert it into the carbon dioxide equivalent. And this means, it is everything here that you can see. That means through price calculation or through cost calculation, it is not only about the price of the product. It is about the environmental, the social, every aspect of external, the things that we are worried about are considered in this. For example, land occupation, you can see it, land transformation. What was this land before and how is it transformed to coffee? You can see the difference for the plantation coffee and the forest coffee. In general, overall, the largest cost of environmental aspect is the land occupation, because once you plant coffee, it stays on land for maybe decades. And this is the largest cost, and it was followed by land transformation and contribution to the climate change. Overall, the environmental cost is $3.6 per kg of roasted coffee. And the biggest one is the social cost. You can see it. The biggest among the social costs is child labor, because people keep their children. We considered only those children that are not going to school at all because of the coffee production. And you can imagine their future livelihood as a result of keeping them at home. What do they expect in their future? The gender discrimination is there, but the insufficient income is an important factor here, and their underpayment is following that one. So this one is the biggest, because the monetization factor given to the social externalities is very high as compared to the environmental externalities, because it is associated with the future of people, the livelihood of people. Next, please. When you look into the four coffee production systems, the environmental cost is highest for plantation coffee. Plantation coffee is it consists only 5% of the whole coffee production, but it involves use of chemical fertilizers. It involves like changing the farmland into land. It can be called forest land or whatever, into coffee. So it is the highest, followed by the garden coffee, which is about 50% of the coffee production, and then followed by semi-forest, and the forest coffee is the least in terms of environmental impact. Next, please. When you see into the social impact, you can see that the child labor is again the highest followed by sufficient income. The sufficient income and underpayment, this is, I told you that this is a preliminary result. The factor that we used, like the benchmark that we used, we are still debating on that with the True Price Foundation because we don't have a national benchmark figure for the decent income with which we will compare. So it is a bit high, I have to tell you, because we will work on this for the next steps. But generally, it's on the higher side because the level of income that a professor gets in Ethiopia is very low. The benchmark we used here is way beyond that. So we will see a significant decrease because we have adjusted it in the SHIP calculation. You will see it because even though it is small, we have to be very agree with what is on the ground. The conclusion is the social costs account for more than 80% of the total externalities. This is mainly related to child labor and underpayment. Environmental costs vary across the 4 production systems, as you have seen. Please, next. The implication is with education, we have a very good education policy. No household, no parent can keep children of schooling age at home in Ethiopia in principle. This policy should be enforced. We have to work on the policy aspect on that one. There is a need for strong policy for agroforestry and similar practices to enhance compulsory tree planting in plantation areas, plantation coffee production areas. One of the drivers for high environmental costs is use of chemical fertilizers in plantation coffee producers. So there should be, we need to work on promotion of organic fertilizers instead of chemical fertilizers because like the garden coffee producers, they are using the organic fertilizer instead of the inorganic one. We need to also encourage certification system that ensure low level of social and environmental costs. And also it has to encourage incentive mechanisms for producers. And we will not say tomorrow morning as Maury said, but there is a need to think of in the long run towards market prices that cover costs to compensate producers. Thank you very much. The next will be presented by my friend Samuel.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. My name is Samuel. I'm from Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research. For this project, I'm collaborating with International Livestock Research Institute. As Maurice and Dr. Getachew said, the cost of production of a food commodity is beyond, beyond the accounting of direct costs like labor, land, and others. And the similarly, the price of a commodity, a food commodity, is beyond the retail price of the commodity. We have to consider social and other environmental costs during the process of pricing a food commodity. In this, my presentation, I will deep dive into the cost, the social, the hidden cost of sheep meat production. Yes, we have done the study was conducted in Kambata zone, which is one of 70 zones of the country. It is in the area in the zone. The sheep production is a means of livelihood, is a means of income generating activity. It is just a business for the area. The area is known with Doyogana sheep. It is a local breed, The sheep, this sheep breed is known with its attractive morphological feature, as well as it is twinning ability and ability of fattening. It was done there. Next, please. We have tried to compare a small scale and the medium scale production systems for our study. Small scale farms are those farms that have less than 6 hairs, 6 sheep hairs, and the other one is above 6 and more. 6 and more. Those are the courses we have considered. The True Price Foundation has outlined 10 environmental courses and 10 social courses. Among them, we have selected 6 environmental courses and 4 social courses that best fit and that are appropriate for meat production, sheep meat production. When we see this is just the result of the study, as you can see, the true price gap or the hidden cost of a kilo of sheep meat is around $6.12 per kg of meat. Yes, it comprises around 1.14 per kg environmental cost and 4.98 social costs. When we see, this means that 6.12 means that this is the cost that is imposed on society and on community and the people and on the ecosystem. When we see the distribution, around 80% of social cost, the hidden cost goes to social costs, and 90% is due to the environmental factors. Next, please. When we deep dive into the environmental causes, as you can see, the dominant cost is climate change, the cost due to greenhouse gas emission, followed by land occupation and land transformation. As you can see, the cost of the hidden cost of small scale farms is higher than that of the medium scale farms. That could be due to, I think it is due to the economies of scale. As the number of animals increase, the cost could decrease because it is theoretically true in economics. This is all. More especially the 3 courses. The 3 courses account more than 80% of the environmental cost. When we come to the social courses, the highest cost goes to labor cost, child labor. We have considered absenteeism and child labor, underage labor in this case. So the highest cost goes to child labor. It is around $3.89 per kg of sheep meat, which is around 70% of the total social costs, followed by the insufficient income and underpayment in the value chain. When we conclude, the target measures such as technical support, incentive for green practice, and improved access to sustainable technologies can lower external costs and keep producers viable. On the other hand, we recommend a fairly compensated compensation for sheep producers. The third, government institutions should promote transparent labeling, awareness campaign, and educational initiatives to encourage more sustainable consumer behavior. Thank you.
All right, just before we go over to presentation by Gain, thank you so much for the presentations up till now. Really interesting, but I see the energy going a little bit. Everyone seems a little bit sleepy, so I want to invite everyone just to stand up for just a second. Everyone, come on. All right, and just shake the arms around. Everyone online at home, please do the same. Shake your arms around, legs. All right. If anyone wants to do a dance or jump around, that's fine too. There's very good examples here. All right, that's it. We can sit down again, and I will hand over to my colleague from Gain.
Hello, my name is Julia Budeka. I work for the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or in short, GAIN, as a research advisor here in Nairobi. And I'm happy to talk to you today about our True Cost and True Price Food Baskets project that we're implementing together with the True Price Foundation, with the Netherlands Food Partnership, and the Access to Nutrition Initiative. This project also contains a series of literature reviews that I'm going into a bit, but I first want to clarify this terminology of food baskets. What does that mean? So it basically means a set of foods that present the local diet or common food items consumed by a demographic group in a country. So I'm going to provide an overview about the project and introduce the literature reviews that are actually the first component of this project, and then dive a little bit deeper into a literature review on health externalities. We've learned a lot about social and environmental externalities, so I think it can be interesting to hear about the health externalities as well. So in this health review, we're currently at the data extraction phase, so we don't have actual results to present yet, but there are definitely some insights that are interesting that I'm going to share. So we've heard already a bit about the background. So every food comes with a cost to our environment, our health, our society, but these costs are not included or reflected in traditional price calculations and are widely paid by the society, for example, in form of underpayment of farmers or increasing healthcare costs. And there are different estimations of true global food costs. But what often comes out of this is that the costs to human life through unhealthy diets, what we see here in light blue, make up for the highest share of that. So yeah, which countries cause actually the highest hidden costs? It's by far the upper middle and high income countries, while the low income countries by far burden most of the costs. So there is quite a big imbalance here. So there are several ways of correcting for the hidden costs. So we have already heard about a few approaches in the previous presentations. There's, for example, true cost accounting, which reveals the true value of food by making the benefits of affordable and healthy diets visible, but also revealing the costs of damage to the environment and our health. So there are a lot of approaches out there for true cost accounting. Just wanted to introduce a few here and frameworks. And then there's also true pricing, which means incorporating these externalities or hidden costs in the actual market prices. So in our approach, we are going to build on these existing approaches, but we've also realized a few gaps. For example, an incomplete list of externalities considered, for example, health externalities not considered, challenges regarding data availability and quality. Then it's sometimes quite difficult to translate these intangible impacts, for example, health externalities, into monetary units, and lack of standardization in monetary factors. So while building on these existing approaches, what we are going to do is to expand upon the methods that exist by including a wide range of externalities, including social, environmental, and health externalities, to also consider combining existing methods, so to address the limitations of the individual approaches. And when recommending improved food baskets with reduced externalities, we're also going to consider the nutritional value, but also the affordability, which is quite important. Yeah, so as mentioned, yeah, with the True Price Foundation, Netherlands Food Partnership, Access to Nutrition Initiative, we designed this multi-component project with the main objective of methodological advancement and testing to determine the true cost and the true price of observed or current food baskets, but also of recommended food baskets. And we heard before that the context is very important, so we're going to do this in 3 countries, so in the Netherlands and Kenya, but also in either Indonesia or Nigeria. That's still to be decided. And also considering certain demographic groups, it's also still to be decided, either focusing, for example, on young children, women of reproductive age, low-income groups, or adolescents. So this is our theory of change. You just have to look for now on the left side, so where we see our work packages. So this project just started end of 2024. So we are still in the early stages. At the moment, we're establishing the knowledge base. That's work package 1 through this series of literature reviews. And based on that, based on the findings, we are developing a true cost accounting methodology that will be tested. And then eventually we will be able to calculate and suggest alternative options for food basket that have reduced externalities. And then, which is actually work package 4, would be the middle part here, the influencing part, where we inform policymakers, provide them with accurate information and recommendations. Also going to work with value chain actors and encourage them to reduce external costs, and with consumers to increase awareness on these hidden costs and alternative options. And the final impact, which we see on the right, is changes in production and consumption patterns that eventually lead to reduced environmental, health, and social costs that are associated with that. Yeah, so as mentioned before, we have the literature reviews here as the work package 1 to establish a knowledge base. So the one we started with is the scoping review of health externalities, and then we have 2 narrative reviews, one on environmental and one on social externalities. And they all share the same research question. So what methods, tools, data sources are available for monetizing health, social, and environmental externalities that are associated with the production and also the consumption of single foods or food groups, meals, or whole diets. So this is now our review on health externalities. So as already mentioned, true cost accounting for environmental and socio-economic externalities is already quite well documented, but the health impact valuation only gained momentum recently. So there's a growing interest in this field at the moment. So there are frameworks developed, methodologies that have come up, but they have not yet been comprehensively reviewed. So this is where we can come in. So these health externalities, they arise at any stage of the food's life cycle, like starting at agriculture, production on the farm, to consumption and waste disposal. So I just put a few examples here for negative health externalities. There, for example, there can be pesticide exposure for agricultural workers, antimicrobial resistance through livestock production, NCDs, meaning non-communicable diseases that are associated with unhealthy food consumption, and foodborne illness from unsafe practices, for example. And then there's also positive health externalities, for example, health outcomes from access to nutritious and safe food, and reduced healthcare expenditures from the adoption of healthy diets. Yeah, this is for our methodology. So we included peer-reviewed articles in our scoping review, as well as other literature sources like reports and working papers. We searched the databases Agricola, CABI, PubMed, Scopus, and Web of Science. And we had a 2-stage screening process, first title and abstract, and then full text. And before we pilot tested to refine the exclusion and inclusion criteria. And then at the moment, we're testing our data extraction instrument, which is like a pre-designed standardized form. And then we're going to use descriptive quantitative analysis and also qualitative analysis to analyze and present our results. So this is just to show that we initially identified roughly 4,800 studies. Out of that, 2,800 more or less were selected for screening. And then out of that, we actually only ended up with 99 studies in the end. And I would just like to give you a bit more information about these 99 studies that are now included for the review. So a vast majority was conducted in Europe, followed by Asia. 16% had a global focus, and then followed by North America and Africa. So maybe it's good that we're focusing at least on one African country in our project. Regarding the level of assessment, most of the studies focused on a single food item or individual foods, followed by entire diets, food groups, or specific diets. Most focused on the consumption aspect of the value chain. Some also on both production and consumption, and 26% on production. Regarding the specific food or diets, we noticed that, a large share of studies focused on alcohol, which was actually also not expected. Specific diets were considered by 13%, followed by fruits and or vegetables, starchy staples, including cereals by 7%, as well as crops in general and animal source foods, smaller by sugar and sugar sweetened beverages. And then many other examples, but I was just going to show you the main aspects here. And looking at the actual health externalities, we see at the bottom a large number of studies focused on chronic diseases, non-communicable diseases, and diet-related diseases. And then this was followed by foodborne diseases, poisoning, toxicity, pollution, pesticide exposure, then followed by mortality and DALYs. DALYs means disability-adjusted life years. So it combines the years of life lost due to premature death, but also takes into account the years lived with a disability. And then this was followed by healthcare costs, alcohol-related diseases, occupational health, for example, accidents on the farm, pollution on the farm, things like that. But many studies also combined these externalities. For example, occupational health and pollution was often combined, or alcohol-related diseases and cancer, and so on. So what we also found is that many studies actually did not provide actual monetization of health externalities. This is also a reason why we ended up in the screening process only with 99 studies in the end, because this was a big challenge. It's quite complex to provide this. Often the health externalities could not be tied back to a specific food or a diet, and we also had to exclude it. For example, we had the healthcare cost for diabetes, but we didn't know which food is this now connected to exactly, so they were not included. And then interestingly, there are also many modeling approaches for future interventions to reduce negative health externalities, which actually provided quite interesting methodologies. Yeah, so how can this be useful now at this stage? So this already gives us an idea about the current knowledge gaps and trends that are out there. It gives us an assurance that we include the neglected externalities in our approach. We consider the possibility of combining existing methodologies. And this will also help us to strengthen our proposal to fundraise for the next work packages. And in the end, we're going to collaborate with existing or with external partners and domain experts to fill these methodological gaps. And in the end, all of these reviews, not just the one on health externalities, but also environmental and social externalities, are going to be useful to summarize the approaches out there, to discuss trends, highlight strengths and weaknesses, draw a lesson learned from case studies, note existing gaps in the literature, and then formulate recommendations. So for us, it will feed into the second work package and help us to develop the true cost accounting methodology that in the end helps us to calculate and suggest alternative food baskets with reduced externalities that still consider nutritional value and affordability. Thank you very much.
Right. No, it's not working for me either. There we are. We have some time for Q&A left. Thank you, Julia. Thanks everyone for the really nice presentations. I think we're going to start here in the audience, and then we will come to the online questions as well. So if there are any questions from the audience, now is the time to pose them to any of our presenters here. So opening the floor. Of course, Namukulo has a question. Please, I think you can use your microphone. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, make it sound like I'm always asking questions. Two questions. One for the study. My question is, I noticed in comparison to the Ethiopia study, you have not paid any attention to capacity sharing of methodologies. Given the novel nature of price accounting, Is that a consideration? And if not, I would like to plead for it, to at least engage the local universities, because that will take the information into teaching processes and we can have better capacities in them. So that's the challenge I want to give you. And then to Getachew and Samuel, again, making a comparison with what was presented for Kenya on the issue of pesticide use. I don't recall, I may have just missed it, seeing that as an aspect in the true cost analysis that you did. So the question that I have is that not a factor at all in the production practices for coffee, especially the plantation coffee? And then maybe for sheep as well, I presume they would probably have to dip them or drip them somehow. Is that not a factor? I just was curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's very, very good question. Very important. I don't know if it's working. Yeah, but in the first work package where I mainly focused on the knowledge base because I was talking about the literature reviews. But one important part of that is also the stakeholder mapping and establishing a network in the countries we're working with. So we're definitely going to, sorry, yeah, thank you. Definitely going to recruit additional members in country stakeholders, which also includes universities. So that's very important. So that's what's going to happen for Kenya and for the Netherlands and for the other middle income country that we're selecting. So capacity sharing is definitely a big part. It's very important. Thanks.
All right, and Getachew, do you want to answer Namkulo's question?
Thank you, Namakulo. This is one of the issues that we really seriously considered in our study, but the coffee production system doesn't really use these pesticides. We have come across very little use in the plantation coffee, but it is really very small.
All right, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it is a positive thing.
Yeah.
So I think it would be useful to actually flag it, because if our exercises in true cost accounting is to encourage positive production practices, I think when we find a positive one, it would be useful to flag it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we will do that, because even the chemical fertilizer uses only with the commercial plantations. Otherwise, others are not using chemical fertilizer, and pesticide use is not really common. So we will really emphasize this on our reports.
All right, thank you very much. If it's okay, I'd like to take a question from the online and then go back to the audience. For Getachew and Samuel, the question is, has the outcome of the analysis been discussed with the farmers and their families? And if so, did you get a response?
As I said, we are at the preliminary stage now. So we didn't finalize our work, and we didn't get back to the farmers. Even we need to discuss this at all levels, not only with farmers, but also with the extension system, the policymakers. Now we are finalizing our preliminary analysis, and after we finish everything, we'll get back to them.
Very nice point. I saw some other questions from the audience. Yeah.
Cool. So my name is Adrian, and my question is to any panelist should go for it. Given that the circumstances that influence the overall value of the true, cost of certain products, i.e. the discussion around coffee or the discussion around sheep are particularly changing, what would you say is the best way to comprehensively include the fact that these prices are particularly changing so that you make those, reports going forward as representative and as inclusive of trying to solve the problem as possible? Yeah. Right. Can I? So the environmental impact and the social impact, the extent is continuously changing on a daily basis, right? So given that this is true, what would you say is the best way to incorporate this changing nature of these environmental and social impacts so that the reports are as representative and as inclusive of, the changing nature of these problems? And then by extension, how do you then get to solve these things as effectively as possible?
Very, very good question. Thank you. So a few things on that. I think one is that a lot of these monetization factors have local aspects that take into account local circumstances. And we update these monetization factors every year. So technically, if you want to do this every year, which is a bit costly and maybe not necessary, but if you do that, you could take into account changing factors, right? And for example, in the case of the banana study that we're doing, where we are doing interventions on the farm, the idea would be to, after 3 to 5 years, redo the study and see what the effects are on the true price gap. So changes, so the changes that happen over time that are captured both in the monetization factors that change, and so these are the local circumstances that change. For example, if an area gets drier, then the price for water use gets higher, right, every year. So that's kind of included in this method. And then it's a matter of redoing the study over time to see the effects of the interventions. I hope that answers your question.
Just to add to what Maurice said, the issue is not to increase the price of the product to the consumers. It should target reducing these externalities. For example, the biggest cost in both the sheep and the coffee production is the social externality cost. So, and in both cases, it is about child labor. There are regulations, there are policies in the country. What we need to do is we need to work with the government how really this can be really implemented properly. People for sheep, the shepherds are the major costs. People let the children to follow the sheep and then abandon their schooling. And it is about changing this mindset. The government has already designed the policy. It has to be implemented properly. And with regard to plantation coffee, we said the land transformation issue is the major agenda. In Ethiopia, for example, there is a green legacy project where billions of trees are planted every year. So it is a matter, I know that the coffee producers are planting tree is about like maximizing these efforts in such areas so that the costs that we see are decreasing from time to time through different interventions rather than jumping into the market and inflating the prices to consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Getachew and Margaret. Are there any other questions? Yes, please.
I have a question to Maurice. So I saw you did true price calculations for World Food Program, the foods. I don't know particularly which foods they were, but is it like foods like super cereals for malnutrition, or just these foods that are usually distributed to countries where children are malnourished? So my question is, in these foods, they use high resource proteins like soybean and milk powder. So when you did a true price calculation and you presented to them, what was their reaction to that? Do they ever think of using alternative sources of protein, for example, insects, or whichever? What was their reaction to that, and what are they doing about it after your presentation to World Food Program?
I'm not really sure about these specific results or their response. What I can say in general is that I think, as Julia also mentioned, referring to, I guess, the question that you're asking, health costs or health benefits are not as far developed in our method as the other aspects of our method. So we do have a lot of health factors in the method, for example, related to toxicity from the use of pesticides, etc. That's all in there, but nutritional health, that's the specific point, is not yet there. It's very complex. We're actually working on it, but it's really complex to get that into a robust method. I've seen many instances in which, but that's more in the Dutch context, where the results have been used to change the protein source of food offerings. And in the Dutch context, that usually means we want to get rid of meat because we have, I don't know, 40 million cows in a very small country. It's not sustainable. So yeah, that is often the context in which we operate now. And I think in the future, if we can have this kind of studies as well, that could be super beneficial and potentially also support your startup.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a question from the back.
Yes, good afternoon. I am from the Sustainable Agriculture Network. It's a network of organizations from all continents, and I want to congratulate you because I think of what I've seen, this is the most important session because of the transformational power.
We'll take that compliment. Thank
Yes,
you.
take it. And I think we are, you mentioned before about mindsets, paradigms, and I think the whole economy, it's in, we have a broken economy, extractive economy. We need to go into a more regenerative economy, into a circular bioeconomy where we put nature and people first instead of money first. So, and I have one question. It's just because I would like to, actually, we invited people from the Global Alliance for the Future of Food to give a presentation on true cost accounting. And I would like to have also the opportunity to have some of you to we have a kind of a monthly series that we call Agro Talk, because I think this is something we need to get aware. I remember having a conversation in one of the General Assemblies, and people were saying, oh, we could not buy organic food because it's more expensive. But you need to think why it's more expensive. So that's my question. Subsidies. Humanity is investing huge amounts of subsidies in industrial agriculture, in petroleum as well. So if we were just able to change, to direct those subsidies into more regenerative way of producing food, I think that could be an option. So I think it's something important. I'm not an economist, but it's just common sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe Maurits can speak to this, and maybe also even Getachew, you can elaborate on what these true price analysis might mean for the national context and the national pathways following the Food Systems Summit. But maybe first Maurits.
Yeah, maybe, thanks for the compliment, by the way. That's very nice. I think in general, it's a very fair point. Subsidies steer the economy a lot. And we hope that by working with governments more and more, that we can redirect the subsidies. And I think the pricing aspect of this type of work is really important there, because you put these sometimes fake environmental and social topics into the same unit basically as the subsidy unit, which is money. And you can really showcase like, hey, you can subsidize this type of agriculture, but in the long run, that's going to cost you a lot due to the health effects, due to the loss of biodiversity, etc. And this is a kind of a paradigm in which you need to be able to speak to policymakers. So I'm really, I really support that, and maybe we can team up on that and see how we can do that.
Thank you very much for your compliments. You are right. Subsidy is the major driver behind most of these emission things. Like the subsidy goes to fertilizer, for example, chemical fertilizer. And when people, farmers use more chemical fertilizer, the pollution, the water pollution increases. The level of emission also increases, and there are so many things. But food systems is about the 5 P's. It's about people, about the planet, about peace, prosperity, and partnership. Like taking planet as one of the things. Whatever we thought we have been talking about, it was about the planet. We need to reduce the land transformation, reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and so on. The costs that we indicated are that one. When we are talking about people, we are being about, that is about like child labor, gender discrimination, earning livelihood of people. So encouraging such practices is, it should be as heart of the food systems transformation. It touches about everything. Like if we don't have a really a sustainable environment, we can't have peace across the world, because people cannot produce in the long run. And if there is no food, there is no political stability. And so it is connected with all of the components of the food systems transformation agenda. So really we can work together. We can really promote this idea. Now we are trying to when take this to the work that we are doing in Ethiopia. ILRI, the CGIAR is really closely working with the government of Ethiopia in the food system transformation process. We have been behind the whole development of the document, and we are also supporting the government heavily in the implementation. So what we are trying is, we are trying to generate evidence that can support sustainable food systems transformation. Sustainability, the issues that we talked about are about sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Getachew. I see we're coming to the end of our session, but I suggest if we are not kicked out of the room, we take another 10 minutes to go through the last questions in the room here. But of course, if you must leave, please feel free to. And I see the rain is also coming inside, so I hope the guys on the right are okay. Last questions, I think we can take about 3 more. So there's Namkulo, there's a lady at the back, and I think this, yeah. Namkulo, do you want to go first?
Mine is a comment based on the transformative nature that has been sort of like given some accolades there. And it's with reference to the African continent and the transformation pathways that have been developed. We know we are on a continent where food production has to increase. We still have lots of hungry people. And as part of that increasing productivity, we are beginning to see more and more use of pesticides, fertilizers, and what have you, chemical fertilizers in particular. What I'd like to suggest to the team is to also look at misuse of fertilizers as an additional element, because it's one thing to use fertilizer and a completely another one to overuse and end up with the fertilizer in the water bodies. And because of capacity with our small scale farmers, we find even on use of pesticides, it's if I use so much, it's good. And so if I use more, it might be better. So they will actually use even more than that, what they need to use at their own costs. So I think it's a useful element to look at from a transformative perspective, look at trajectories on when things are used properly versus when things are misused. And then if you use the agroecology regenerative routes and compare those trajectories so that we have as much information as possible to inform the transformation efforts that countries are making. Thank you.
Thank you, Namkulo. Are there any responses? I think we've noted, and I think they're very wise, a wise comment.
Well, maybe very shortly, as you have seen, true pricing, true cost accounting is often on a per kilogram basis, which also takes into account the yield of a plantation. It's a very important driver. So the perfect use of fertilizer will in the end result in the maximization of yield and therefore the lowest true cost per kilogram. So I think it's a great, well, again, I'm biased, but it's a tool to steer these kind of decisions.
All right. I promised the lady in the back.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Paris. I'm from the University of Nairobi. This is the first time I'm hearing about true pricing, and I was a bit, wondering what it's all about, and I'm glad I've heard through it. So I'm also a founder of a youth-led organization called Standard Foundation, and we interact with local communities because we're trying to co-create solutions with them. And I was wondering if, first of all, how you guys involve the local communities when you're calculating the true pricing, the true prices, and also if maybe you do these calculations here in Kenya as well. And I was also wondering, because there's so much, how would I say this? There's so much implications coming from lack of great price control. There's like right now there's so many culturally relevant food that is not being grown by local communities because of the market value. It's not so great, so they don't grow it anymore, but it's like dryland foods, things that will really support them or help them and also help with food insecurity and stuff. So I was wondering, like, would this true pricing tools, because I've noticed most of the tools you've mentioned are cost-effective methods. So I was wondering, are there things you've already begun to help solve such issues of empowering local communities to planting this dryland foods, culturally relevant foods, trying to solve that market value issue? Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting question. I think the Ethiopia team can speak to how involving local communities.
I'll answer the first question and then we'll try the second. How we involve the local communities in calculation of the true price. The first place, the data we use for true price calculation, it comes from smallholder farmers and commercial farmers. When we collect data, that we tell them the purpose of this, the survey. We tell them that we want to see the social externalities in the way they can understand it, using their own language, and also the environmental externalities. Given the complexity of the methodology, we don't, in the first place, we don't do the calculation on the spot, and the local communities are not involved in the calculation, but they are source of data. And what we are planning is, after we finish our the calculations and the data, concretize the data, we will have a consultation with some of the communities on what we really found. that is what we are going to be. Otherwise, as you have seen it, some of the things are very complex to calculate, so it's not something that you do involving the local communities. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, by the way, great question. So in the end, at least our perspective is that you, in the end, do something with these calculations, right? So you're doing these calculations also to help the local communities and the local farmers. I think it's fair to say that we, as an Amsterdam-based organization, we cannot do that in this part of the world or in Latin America. So we also need to work together with local organizations to change and improve situations for local communities in that sense. And then about your last point, if I understand it correctly, it made me think about a study we did into tomatoes. Sounds random. Tomatoes in Spain, which is typically a tomato country, but they are producing it in a very dry area. And so the water costs were super high. And I mean, that kind of insights may help to reconsider what are we growing here, and is that the right staple, the right food that we grow in these areas? And so if you have dry land products that are better suited for these areas, potentially the true price gap is lower, and therefore you could consider growing these type of products. I mean, it's an application I can think of. Really curious also to talk a bit further after the session to see if we can do that.
Thank you for your good question. Just adding is that I think it might also be interesting for the Food Baskets project if there are local nutritious foods that would be better than more commercialized foods to include in your food basket for a local community. That is something we should consider in that Food Baskets project. So thank you for your question. Now we're really running out of time. So I promised this in the back who was bothered by the rain. So I think he deserves to pose his question, but if we could keep it slightly short. And just if you were wondering what the QR code in the back is, it's for the membership of the Global Partnership for the True Price of Food. You can scan it. There'll be a Google form. There's no strings attached, but we will send you our newsletters and you'll be invited to our meetings. So that's why that's up there. But please, your question.
Okay, thank you very much for an opportunity. My name is Duke, and I'm glad that this has come at a time that the global economy is facing a challenge, especially in determining prices for agricultural commodities. Yeah, so initially we used to calculate prices using the basic concepts like labor, agricultural inputs, but now there's a new thing that is coming all together about the sustainability and the social impact. So maybe my question was on how did the program or the project come up with the value regarding the environmental impact, because I see like there was some monetary value to it. Maybe I wanted to understand how did you come up with that value, so that maybe just to understand better. Thank you.
Yeah, how to explain this shortly. It's a bit of a puzzle. Maybe also good to explain it in deep dive after the session to you. I think the most important thing is that this value is based on what we call remediation. And remediation is basically the ambition to either restore, or if that's not possible, compensate the damage. So you pollute the lake, you damage the environment and you want to clean it up. That's basically what you want to do as much as possible. And based on that type of assessment, you can value these environmental impacts. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I think also there's a lot of more resources on the methodology and the monetization on the True Price website. So I invite everyone to check that out as well. And I also invite everyone to connect with us following this session. If you have any questions, there's some flyers about the Global Partnership and the Food Baskets Project over here. And of course, the QR code there. And then questions online, we'll try to get back to you as well. But questions here, please connect with us after the session. And with that, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate you coming. It's nice to see a full room. Yeah, and I hope to see you in the future. Thank you very much.